Hello and welcome back. In recent weeks, I've been thinking a lot about the comic book industry of the 1990s, and specifically an event that took place in 1996, the DC vs. Marvel crossover event. Back when Marvel and DC were on cordial terms with each other, they would often do crossovers with some of their major characters. And DC vs. Marvel, or alternately Marvel vs. DC, as the title would alternate between which name was on the top, was the pinnacle of this. The basic story was that there were two cosmic beings known as the Brothers. One was the embodiment of the Marvel Universe, the other the DC Universe. Previously, the brothers did not know of each other's existence, but when they found out about each other, they decided to have a contest with their universe as champions to see who had the best universe. And the loser's universe would be destroyed. The first 3 issues of this miniseries highlighted several different battles between Marvel and DC's best, with Aquaman taking on the Submariner, Quicksilver racing the Flash, Superman matching his strength with the Hulk, and Wolverine taking on Lobo. 5 of the battles were voted on by comics readers to determine who the winner would be. At the end of the 3rd issue, the cosmic beings the Spectre and the Living Tribunal, in an effort to keep one of the universes from being destroyed, used their powers to merge the 2 universes together. After that issue, for 1 month, neither Marvel nor DC published any issues under their own imprints, but they jointly published 12 issues under the imprint The Amalgam Universe. Amalgam, as you'd guess from the name, was a combination of the Marvel and DC universes. The Amalgam titles featured characters like Darkclaw, a fusion of Batman and Wolverine, Super Soldier, a combination of Captain America and Superman, Speed Demon, a strange merging of the Flash, Etrigan, and Ghost Rider, as well as JLX, a combination of the Justice League and the X-Men. Of course, after that 1 month, everything was undone in the 4th and final issue of Marvel vs. DC, and status quo returned to normal. Some of what came out of the Amalgam Universe was cool, some of it was interesting, and some of it was a little dumb. But it was an interesting experiment from the top 2 players in the comic book industry. But that experiment came in 1996, at the height of the collapse of the comic book industry due to the speculator market. So a brief explanation of the collapse of the 90s for those of you who don't follow comics. Back in the 1980s, with the publication of titles like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, comic books were transitioning from a children's entertainment medium to more of an adult collectible market, with the industry being taken more seriously, and with more fans of the medium looking at getting key back issues. During that time, some older key issues like Action Comics #1, first appearance of Superman, Detective Comics #27, first appearance of Batman, and Incredible Hulk 181, first appearance of Wolverine, were skyrocketing in price, with those 2 Golden Age titles going for tens of thousands of dollars at auction. This spike in back issue values caught the attention of speculators, who started looking at comic books as an investment rather than just entertainment. These speculators started buying multiple copies of key issues of current comics. The comics industry took note of this speculator market and started feeding it, launching many new series, knowing that first issues were very desirable, playing into that by releasing multiple covers for those first issues, and using gimmicks like pack-in trading cards, die-cut covers, holograms, foil stamps, all to increase the desirability of certain issues. And it worked, with comics seeing bigger sales than they had in years. Marvel and DC also created certain events to feed the hype and gain media interest. In particular, events like the death of Superman, Nightfall, and the Clone Saga, all of which saw popular long-standing characters like Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man being taken off the table and replaced by derivative characters. The death of Superman, in particular, was widely hyped in the media, and that particular issue, Superman #75, was shipped in an all-black poly bag. Of course, most of these highly touted seismic changes were undone just several months later. One very fundamental economic truth that the speculators failed to take into account was supply and demand. Those older issues, especially the Golden Age issues, were so valued because there was very few of them. Comic books from their inception in the 1930s through the 1970s were considered disposable entertainment. Millions of copies of comics were printed in the 30s and 40s, and millions were thrown out, with no one suspecting that they'd be considered high-value collectibles in the years to come. With so many collectors and speculators buying multiple copies of new comics, bagging, boarding them, and putting them away in climate-controlled environments, those comics would never see the scarcity of older comics and would never achieve those type of values. Once this realization hit, the speculator boom was over and the bottom dropped out of the comic books market quickly. Publishers went out of business, comic book shops closed, and Marvel, having made some other poor business decisions during that time, filed for bankruptcy in 1996, the very same year that they teamed up with DC. Of course, the comic book industry did survive, but in my opinion, it's just a shadow of its former self. These days, Marvel and DC are mostly used for research and development for creatively bankrupt Hollywood studios, hoping to cash in on the popularity of comic book characters. But even that has seen diminishing returns in recent years. In the past several years, I've been looking at what happened to the comic book industry back in the 90s and comparing it to the toy industry. As collectors, we know that the past several years have been challenging. Even before the global pandemic, the toy industry was facing distribution issues, with the events of 2020 only exacerbating that, along with manufacturing and shipping delays. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of people getting back into toy collecting, especially with Gen X properties from the 80s, which has caused a recent spike in vintage toy values. The toy industry, finding it challenging to market to kids, who over the years have lost a lot of interest in toys, have been reviving those Gen X properties by the droves. And it's long been my opinion that that business strategy is not sustainable. The influx of new He-Man and G.I. Joe figures is great, but how many kids versus adults are buying those toys? And if the adult market stops buying, then what? There's also the issue of certain properties being licensed across multiple different companies. I'm thinking of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in particular. Honestly, how the hell many different Ninja Turtles figures do we need? Who's buying all these Ninja Turtle figures? And we're all very aware of the frustrations of modern toy collecting, the continuing distribution issues, the multiple exclusives that may be impossible to get, the inability of toy companies to make many of their products available worldwide, as well as ongoing quality issues that seem to be affecting more toys now than ever. And amid all these issues with the toy industry comes the announcement last week that Hasbro and Mattel are joining forces with a multi-year cross-licensing agreement. And I couldn't help but think about those Marvel-DC collaborations in the 1990s as the comic book industry was collapsing all around them. Now, maybe some cool things will come out of these collaborations. They've already announced Transformers-themed Hot Wheels, but what if they did G.I. Joe branded Hot Wheels, complete with an affordable USS Flagg playset? How about classic Mattel characters like Big Jim and Major Matt Mason showing up in the G.I. Joe Classified line? We could see Jem and the Holograms cross over with Barbie, or Barbie-themed My Little Ponies. And what if the Transformers crash-landed on Eternia, and the Autobots and Decepticons took the forms of the Wind Raider, the Talon Fighter, Roton, or Landshark? There are a lot of possibilities for cool crossover toys, but will any of them happen? I honestly doubt it. Both Hasbro and Mattel seem to be stuck in a creative rut lately, and they don't seem to be willing to take chances, especially since both companies are publicly traded and their stock prices have been taking a hit recently. So will they take chances and come up with some cool crossover concepts? Or will they stick to safe corporate ideas like Transformers, Hot Wheels, and Barbie Monopoly? If I were a betting man, I'd choose the latter. As I pointed out in previous times, like in my Micronauts video, Hasbro in particular is sitting on a mountain of IPs that they refuse to do anything significant with. You Mask and Micronauts fans know exactly what I mean. While Mattel has a few IPs of its own that they could do something with. Why haven't Big Jim or Major Matt Mason appeared as 6-inch modern style action figures to interact with G.I. Joe Classified? With Jurassic Park toys being so popular, why hasn't Mattel taken a chance on bringing back the Dino Riders? In the end, I'm not optimistic about the future of the toy industry. I'm sure it will go on, in some shape or form, as the comics industry has, but I don't think Hasbro and Mattel's cross-licensing deal is going to have a significant impact. It seems the modern toy industry is in the same boat as the comic book industry, movies, and television, with a lack of innovation and creative ideas, surviving on an endless supply of remakes, nostalgia, sequels, and derivatives. But when the audience eventually gets tired of all that, what comes next? So what do you guys think? Will the Hasbro-Mattel deal have any sort of significant impact on the toy industry? Or do you think it will be all flash and no substance? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.